Good afternoon to everyone on the line, and welcome to today's webinar where we're going to be getting an in-depth look at Virgin Media's focus on candidate experience. We're going to be taking a look at the challenges, the strategy, and also the initial results from this particular focus. So just before we get started, let me cover a couple of tips regarding the webinar itself. So it's just worth highlighting that you can join today's session either using the audio of your computer, microphone and speaker, or you can select to use telephone if you're not getting such a good quality sound. Clearly, we have a large number of people on the webinar today, so all the lines are muted. Unfortunately, we won't be able to hear your interactions. However, we do really encourage you to ask questions. Now, this is managed by the panel on the right-hand side of your screen in the GoToWebinar. We're going to have some time at the end of today's session to take your questions, and we'd really encourage you to ask those questions and type them into the panel as we start going through today's webinar presentation. Okay, so let's move into some introductions. First of all, I would like to welcome you all. My name is James Harrison, and I'm VP of Sales here at Avature. Clearly, I have the uncoolest picture amongst my colleagues who are joining me today. Neil, Dave, thanks very much for joining. Perhaps you could also introduce yourself to our attendees.
Great, thanks James. Hi, I'm Neil Chivers, Employer Brand and Marketing Manager at Virgin Media. My job here is to make sure that we're providing the best possible experience for candidates and attracting the best candidates to come and work for our business. And we're going to tell you a bit today about how we do that and what our plans are for the future.
Cheers Neil, cheers James. My name's Dave Hazlehurst. I'm a director at Ph.Attraction. We're based up in, we've got offices in the centre of the universe in Liverpool in the UK, down here in London and over in New York. And we work in employer brand, talent attraction and candidate experience. And we had a great time working on this project with Neil and the team, and I'm really looking forward to talking through it all.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Going to look forward to hearing about the collaboration and uncovering the candidate experience that you've built. So, let's start at the very beginning. I mean, question to you, Neil. I've been really impressed with everything that I've read about Virgin Media's dedication to providing a great candidate experience, and we're going to see some more examples of that later on. But why don't we start off by hearing, what drove Virgin to really focus on the candidate experience?
I think for us it was a realisation that as a business, whilst we don't necessarily struggle in general to attract candidates into our business, because we have such a well-established brand and all of the success of the Virgin brand means that a lot of people's expectations of what it's like to work here and what it would be like to go through the recruitment process are actually, or have actually been very different to what they are in reality. So we were just really keen to look at how can we actually improve that experience and make sure that every single person that touches our business, whether they're a customer or a candidate applying for a job, actually gets a Virgin experience and actually goes away, whether they get the job or not, whether they buy our products or not, actually feeling that that they were given the Virgin treatment and that they go back to their friends, their families, and pass on that. And I think for us, what really brought this to light was when we were looking at candidate NPS. So NPS is the measurement and metric that we use in our consumer side of the business to look at whether somebody ultimately would recommend our products and services, or whether actually they've had a bad experience and that would be the least thing that they'd want to do. We do exactly the same thing in the recruitment process. So at the moment, or last year certainly, we were measuring at the end of the interview process, once somebody had been offered or once somebody had been rejected, they were given the chance to feedback what they felt about the recruitment process. And when you look at some of these anecdotal comments that you can see on the screen, the general consensus was, people may have had a good experience, but actually there were some things that they felt let them down. And often it was not really getting communicated particularly well in terms of where they're at in the progress, not really understanding the reasons why they rejected, not even in some cases being told that they were rejected. You know, automation, everybody's talking about how, you know, AI and how technology is going to help improve the process and automate processes. But you know, candidates wanted to hear firsthand what could they do to improve, what could they learn from, how could they do things differently next time. And we really wanted to do something about this. Our NPS score 2 years ago, at the end of 2014, was -29, which, you know, when we showed that to the business, that they were kind of alarmed and you know, really focused on how we could improve that.
I mean, you know, clearly this was you know, a focus on you know, the experiences that your candidates were receiving. But obviously there's a bigger picture here. There was a bigger impact, and you guys did a lot of work analysing that. Perhaps you can share with the attendees, you know, what that impact was to the Virgin Media business.
Yeah, sure. So we did a survey internally, looking at the data of our candidates and mapping that to the data that we had on our customer base. And what we did was look at a sample of about 3,000 respondents, and then we're able to reflect that in terms of the wider candidate audience. And overall, based on data that we carried on our existing customers, we worked out that of those people that we'd rejected, over almost 7,500 of them were customers that had left Virgin Media as a customer as a direct result of the poor candidate experience. So this isn't about the service that they experience as a customer. This is them going through the recruitment process. And when you look at the average spend per customer, that works out at about £4.5 million a year we were going to be losing as a result of people saying that they were leaving Virgin Media. And not just saying that they were leaving, actually leaving the business. So we worked very closely with our inside BI teams to actually put this business case together and share it with our CFO. And as soon as they saw that massive cost implication to the business of a bad candidate experience, they started to take note, and we started to make some real progress in terms of looking at how we address candidate experience.
I mean, absolutely astounding figures, and again, I know probably many people on the webinar today have seen some of these figures. There's been a lot of press coverage, but I would assume that actually many of our attendees today might also be surprised with their own figures, whether they're in a consumer-based organization or even in a B2B world. So, what a great thing to start analyzing from a return on investment perspective of kind of any new strategy. How did you guys go around, taking that forward, taking those discoveries and looking at ways to fix the issue?
So I guess the first thing was, realization that something needed to be done to change the candidate experience, to improve, to make sure that we had more recommenders and more positive feedback from our recruitment experience. But we knew that we couldn't do it on our own. So, for us, it was important to work with a partner, and PH Creative is the agency that we're working with and continue to work with on this project, to really look at formulating a brief and addressing the challenge. And I think the initial brief that we had was kind of, how do we give better feedback or more detailed feedback to the candidates that we reject? That was our original goal, and to this day, that still is very important. But that really evolved into something much more than just how do we provide feedback. Actually, we wanted to get a reputation in the industry for not just being the listening telecoms business or whatever, but actually a business that listens and acts and does something about it. So we wanted to turn that brief of providing detailed feedback into how can we be the good guys in recruitment, and actually how can we help and support people through the recruitment process. Even if somebody doesn't get a job at Virgin Media, they've invested a lot of time and effort into that recruitment process, and the last thing we want them to do is leave with a bad taste in their mouth. So if we can help them to be a better person, and maybe they just simply weren't right for the job at Virgin Media, but they'll be great at another job in another organisation. We need to be realistic and accept, that actually not everybody is right for our business. But if we can inspire them and motivate them and support them, they can go on to be a better person in another company, or they may come back to us and apply for another job in the future.
Fantastic. Guys on the line, I do apologise. There is some background noise. I think it is someone's microphone rather than a keyboard being typed. So we are going to try and fix that as we go through to today's session. I think this is a perfect point to bring you in, Dave. This is where you and the team were introduced to Virgin Media, and obviously took the brief on. But how did you get started? Where did the project kick off?
Yeah, it was fascinating actually. So when we first met Neil and the team at Virgin Media, I've been speaking about what can we do to help people when we fail them? So let's not just think about how we pass people, but when we fail them. And the guys came up to me and go, oh my God, we're more like head of rejection than we are head of resourcing. And obviously Virgin has this perception behind its brand and what it's going to feel like to people. So we really started to look at, well, why can't we just be the good guys, and what would that mean in the candidate experience and the journey that people take? And we started to explore that, and some people here on this, but listening, may have heard of the Simon Sinek, the Start With Why, and if you haven't, go and check it out. It's a brilliant TED Talk. But it's trying to understand the why, and what was the resourcing team's why? What could they become famous for? And that sort of then, we started to explore that a bit more further. It's like, let's be the good guys in recruitment no matter what. No matter whether they just start the process with us and they don't quite get to the end, or they go through the whole process, through the assessment, the journey, everything that we do is about giving a positive experience. And actually, let's just help them be better and get a job or improve their career no matter what, whether they work for us or not. And that then became, let's become famous for candidate experience. No matter what, we will help people just get better in their careers and help their jobs, whether they actually work for us or not. And that then became, let's just be the good guys of recruitment and become famous for candidate experience.
So clearly, becoming the good guys, Dave, wasn't about donning a cape and a pair of spandex pants. There was a lot more to it than that. But was it clear? Once you started engaging with Virgin Media, about how you were going to add that offer, add that value to the candidates. Again, how did you start that process, and where did you begin?
Okay, I mean, that is a great question, because the brief was initially, how do we reject people better? And actually, it was like, when we were chatting with the guys, it was like, look, it's much more about the entire journey. Now, we actually work into the B2C space and the B2B space, so we do some work outside of talent. And in the world of hospitality, we do a lot of what's called customer experience journey mapping. And that's about understanding the journey that a customer would go through and all the different moments and the steps that they go on their journey, from the initial sort of stimulus of when they engage with a brand all the way through to experience in a hospitality in a hotel. It's like, literally, as they drive into a hotel, what do they feel, what do they think when they walk into the hotel, when they walk into the room, and everything. And we really work hard to identify those moments and those points. And so when we were speaking to the guys and girls at Virgin, we were like, what has this ever been done before in the world of candidate experience? And why don't we treat it like we would do in that world and bring it into the world of talent and map it out? So we really went down this path of this CX journey mapping, and there's lots of ingredients that we look at. And we actually, first of all, run workshops, and here you can see there's me with a bad shirt. I'm not in the spandex, unfortunately, but maybe we'll do that for the outtakes. But what you can see is, here's the team. We've got the Virgin Media team together. And what you can see, it still involves lots of sticky notes and my bad writing, and we literally mapped out every single moment that a candidate would go through in their journey, from attraction through to whether the result, if you like, and whether they're onboarded or not. And we did a lot of work around this, spent a lot of time, lots of energy, lots of sweets. You can see the coffee there, a bit of Starbucks, probably a few beers at the end of it. And what it sort of turns into is something like this. So this is just very kind of top line to give you a flavour of what we produced. And so I just want to, for the listeners in here, I just want to explain this a little bit, because I really believe that, in the world of talent, even now when I'm asking people, have you created a candidate experience journey map? Not many people have really done this, and I think this can be a real game changer. So what we can see across the top are 5 steps. So typical top line, we've got attraction, we've got apply, we've got screen, we've got assessment, and we've got result. And we tried not to speak in pass and fail. We tried to talk about results, ready for today, ready for tomorrow. And that's typically, they're the moments that are, in the recruitment process, top line, the sort of steps or the moments that the candidate will go through. And actually what you have between 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 is there's a time frame there, and that's the moments between the moments. So what could be going on in between the moments in the candidate's world? So we sort of identify what those points are, and then what we can see on the left-hand side are the ingredients or the elements that we want to try and understand at each stage, and this is really, really important. So first of all, you can see feel, and what we're trying to do is identify the emotions that people are going on as they go through each step. Because actually people feel first and then think second. It's how we're hardwired, and actually it's feelings towards a brand that then create how we feel and think about that brand and that experience that we're having. So we look at feel, and we actually don't normally score that 1 to 10. 10 being really happy, and 1 being obviously not so happy. We map that out. Then we look at think. So what's going on in their minds? What questions have they got on this stage? And actually, how do we go about answering them, and do we answer them? Do we even answer them in that moment? Ease is really important. So in the world of B2C, so in the world of consumer, ease is the #1 indicator of delivering a great service. So the sort of analogies here are, we often think we need to motivate people to do more, but actually if we just make it easier, they'll often do what we want. The Amazon one-click bankruptcy button, the one-click buy button for Amazon is genius. It's just so easy to spend money. So how easy is it? Those 3 things create this memory in our minds, and that's now starting to create the multiple moments and memories that create this brand experience. And they're really the main 4. As you go down, the stakeholders, so that's what's involved, who's involved, and the people involved. And then if you see, we sort of map that across, and we look for emotional roller coasters. So if you imagine you've got feel, and you've got attraction, apply, screen, assessment, we can see how some of the emotions could be peaking and troughing if it was a score of 1 to 10 as you go across. And you actually draw a line across, and you see where people become maybe a bit frustrated, or when they're coming to assessment, they're nervous. How can we? And then we start to say, well, how can we make people feel better before they go to us? How can we help prepare them better? What can we do to be more accessible and give them help along the journey? And basically, when you map this out, you then have a view or a candidate journey map and how they feel and think as they would walk through your recruitment process, and you've got a mindset shift there. And then you can look at, okay, what are the types of things that we can do that are going to make people feel better about this?
Dave, it's clear that this is a fantastic way to start analysing, and actually it's amazing that more organisations aren't adopting this or focusing on it. But what else do you think were the key discoveries for you from the process? What else did you learn at VM about the overall employer brand experience, for instance?
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was fascinating, because the way that we look at this is we map these journeys out, and we take different personas. And so obviously the initial reaction there is when we map out the personas of the candidates. But actually, what was really interesting, especially what Virgin Media had done really well, it was actually because they had NPS going. They had the quantity of data and numbers of feedback, but they also had the quality. We had real life written words from candidates, real feedback, which we could really start delving into. And a couple of things that were really important in the journey were the hiring manager, and there's probably people laughing on the other end, that these hiring managers have a real big impact of how people feel towards a brand and the experience they have. Because if you think about it, the assessment part of the journey is emotionally can be really nerve-wracking for some, and if they don't feel prepared, and when they get there, how the hiring manager treats them is really important and makes them feel better, and that has a big impact. And the other thing was feedback are we giving them feedback along the way that's actually helping them and giving value? If we want to be the good guys in recruitment, we've got to give them value. These people are investing in Virgin Media as a brand. You know, they're getting their hair done, they're getting a new suit, or whatever it is they're doing. They're really buying into the organisation. We need to do the right thing and actually give great feedback, create the hiring manager experience, make them feel good about that. So there were some of the things, and we actually validated it. And one of the things that we actually did is we actually started to map out the hiring manager journey, because what we found was the relationship between the recruitment team, the hiring manager, and the candidate, that triangle there, it's really crucial. But actually, part of making this thing better is how do we make it easier for the hiring manager? In fact, how do we make the hiring manager our best friend and just make it easier for them to create an experience and provide the feedback? So that was really, really fascinating to see, and it really played out a key part in that. And when we were doing the sessions with the team, it was really interesting. So the team were really getting energized by it and really starting, because of this mindset shift of let's walk in these candidates' shoes, you know, it very much became, we just need to make things simpler across our process. What are the things that we can do that makes it easier for the candidates? We wanted to make sure that it felt joined up. So again, the triangle between the hiring manager, the recruiter, and the candidate, and also how the candidate can access information and we're available and get feedback. That was really important. How does it feel joined up? How do we create great experiences? And actually everybody involved, all the people involved, even when they walk into the assessment centre and they're greeted by somebody, every single person has a direct impact on how people feel and then think about the candidate experience, which obviously has a direct impact on how they feel about the brand. And then there were some key themes that came out. So contact. How easy is it for candidates to make contact with the team? One of the things that we've even talked about is, you know, should we be more available later on in the evening or even at weekends so that candidates can be contacted easier and show their best? How do we give great feedback, making it easy? And something that we've developed, which Neil will talk about, is how do we give support along the way and how do we help them? Setting clear expectations. One of the things here was we often tell candidates when we're talking to them, we tell them what's going to happen and how it's going to play out. And one of the things we talked about with the team at Virgin was set expectations around emotions. Tell them this is probably how you're going to feel, but don't worry, it's okay. And almost just saying those things can actually make people feel more at ease. So these were some of the key themes that were coming around. And it was like, okay, like if we take these themes, you know, what can we do in terms of solutions to help us become famous for candidate experience, be the good guys in recruitment?
Yeah, so you know, it's clear to see that this was very much a journey, and I think it's something that you know, all recruiters should be keeping in mind, right? You know, about the focus on maintaining a consistent experience throughout the entire hiring process. I think, you know, I certainly see a lot of organisations putting a focus on the career site, almost, you know, the door to your shop, you know, that front end piece that's going to entice people to come in. But clearly this is about a broader, longer term relationship with the candidate. I suppose, you know, Neil, a question for you, you know, what did you guys put in place to make sure that that process was easier, it engaged candidates, you know, through the entire recruiting and hiring process?
I think what we did was take a step outside of, you know, our day-to-day and look at all of those different touch points that a candidate has when they go through the recruitment process. So whether that is them seeing a job on a job board, being approached by one of our recruiters, then engaging with our ATS and understanding how that operates, then navigating their way through the recruitment process all the way through to onboarding it, and actually realising there's a lot of tech there and there's a lot of process, and actually it's quite daunting for the candidate. So one of the first things we did was reviewed our ATS, and last year we moved away from our previous ATS. Now we're using Avature, which obviously was just one part of the puzzle that we needed to fix. But having a great ATS is brilliant in terms of managing the candidates through the flow, but actually from a candidate experience point of view, they want more. So we needed to look at how can we help fill in the gaps where an ATS can't provide things that perhaps we would like them to provide, or how could it partner with some technology. So for us, our solution was really ensuring that what we've got in place, or what we put in place, is going to be something that is going to stay with the candidate across their entire life cycle as they apply for the role and as they go through that recruitment process, making it as easy as possible for them, not bamboozling them with lots of different logins for lots of different systems and having lots of different points of contact, but almost giving them one place where they can go to get everything they need about their application. Yes, they'll have contact with the recruiter, and yes, the ATS will tell them where they are in the process, but actually what we came up with, Vault, which is our online companion for candidates, is really designed to be that one-stop shop where not only can they see where they are in the recruitment process against the roles that they've applied for, they can get access to content, and then I'll come on to explain in a bit more how that works to help them through that. But also, we can start to get some insight from them in terms of their behaviour, what they're looking at, what they're engaging with, how they're feeling. So Vault really was this brand new candidate experience portal, which I know lots of companies have been trying to develop and create. It's bespoke to our needs. It's not it's not an off-the-shelf product. It was something that PH developed for us based on the brief that we gave them, but it is very much integrated with Avature, and the two work very closely together. And for us at the moment, it's only gone live at the end of last year, and so we're sort of 3 months in, but we're already starting to learn from it in terms of what candidates want, how they're feeling, and actually what we still need to do. So one thing I think we should make clear is, yes, this is part of the solution, but there's still a lot more work that we want to do. So if I just take you back to tracking, so as a candidate applying for a job at Virgin Media, as soon as you apply and your application is being received, you will get an email from Avature that will tell you how to access Vault and what Vault is all about. The first time you log in, you are given access to your jobs that you've applied for, and you can see in real time where you are in the recruitment process. So the example we can see on screen here is on a mobile device or on a tablet, customer service advisor, what stage are you at in the process, and also what the next stage is in that recruitment process. And not only does it tell you where you are in the process, it then, based on where you're at in the process, will give you content that's specific to that stage. So quite often the feedback that we get in the recruitment process around our volume recruitment, so our call centre staff, our field technicians, is I've never been to an assessment centre before, I don't really know what to expect from that. Or it could be somebody going to work for one of our head office roles, and actually their expectation of what it's like to work here could be vastly different to the reality. So they want to know a bit more about, what should I wear when I go for my interview, what should I read in advance of that. So by linking their application stage to content about their the stage that they're at, we can actually give them a much richer experience and give them stuff that's timely and not just bombarding them with lots of information up front right at the beginning, when actually they don't necessarily need to worry about that, because if they're not going to make it through to the assessment centre, let's not scare them just yet about what's involved in an assessment centre. So for us, the ability to track their application and give them control of their applications was important, but really important was giving them rich content to help them through that process. Dave, would you mind clicking through to the next slide? Great, thank you. So what you can see here is just some examples of the content that we've got currently within Vault, and I should say that this is something that we continue to expand and build on. So as we get more and more insight in terms of what candidates want to see or would like to see, or even feedback from candidates that have gone through the process, we're able to adapt and build on it. So we started off with some quite general content at the entry stage, how to shake hands, what to think about in terms of body language and posture. But as you go through applying for roles in niche areas of our business, the content, our long-term goal is to have content that's very much specific to them. Video content where actually you might get to see your work environment before you actually go to the interview, so you've got an idea of what to prepare yourself for there. And we're using this content on social media as well to attract people to apply to our jobs, so giving advice on how to write your CV. Now, if somebody's already made an application, that bit of content's not of any use to them, but it's going to be much more useful to those people that have already started to follow us on Twitter or have already visited our career site but haven't not submitted their application, just giving them little tips and tricks on how to give the best impression of yourself and how to make sure you push out the best, the kind of best reflection of yourself in that recruitment process, because we do know it's daunting, and we get over 100,000 people a year applying to our jobs, and let's be honest, unfortunately we can't sit through an interview face-to-face every single person that comes through our door, as much as we might like to do that. So by giving them a chance to present their best version of themselves on their CV, hopefully that will help them to get through to that next stage.
Neil, so you guys have gone through a pretty substantial transformation, and as you just mentioned a moment ago, it's still early days, but what are you putting in place to measure the success? How are you going to identify whether all this hard work has been worth it?
So we've already got NPS, which we continue to measure, and we can look at the candidates' reaction at the end of the process, be it rejected or hired. But what we're actually doing with Volt is measuring the effectiveness of what they're seeing and how they're feeling in real time. So Dave talked about the kind of moment in the moment. So you're in between stages in the process, and you're kind of in limbo. And in the traditional recruitment world, you're waiting to hear from a recruiter. You don't want to chase them up because you don't want to look like you're kind of pestering and being too demanding. And you know that lots of other people are also probably in the same position. But if we can ask them, how are you feeling? Are you nervous about your assessment centre tomorrow? How confident do you feel going into your face-to-face interview tomorrow? We can then get those real-time bits of feedback to then look at where we could optimise and improve things. So actually, if the feedback is, 60% of people that respond say they are unprepared or very nervous about their assessment tomorrow, or if 2/3 of people are feeling nervous, that could well explain why our assessment centres are unfulfilled in some locations. So what can we do to improve it? Let's give them some more content. Let's put in a follow-up call from our recruitment team to make sure they've had an opportunity to answer any questions. Or let's set up a live Twitter Q&A or a live Facebook chat session where actually if they've got any of those questions that they feel a bit silly asking, they can ask them. And that's starting to produce some really valuable insights and results for us.
Fantastic. I think again, the attendees on today's session are going to be probably thinking that again, there was a major technology piece here, but equally this was a major change to the recruiting operation at Virgin Media. We've already discussed there were many stakeholders, and I'm kind of focusing on the hiring manager community because I think a lot of people will be able to kind of sympathise with the impact that they can have on providing a critical part of that candidate experience. What did you guys do around communicating the expectations to the team, get them on board, the change management piece? How did you get that internal buy-in from those hiring manager and senior stakeholders?
So, I mean, one of the things that PH helped create for us is a toolkit that so our social playbook that we have shared internally within our recruitment function. Also presented it to our senior people leadership team, our people business partners, and making sure that we communicate internally what we're doing and why we're doing it. So we were in a fortunate position in terms of timing where last year at our annual people conference, where almost 300 people from across the business that work within our HR function got together. We actually did a promo for Volt there to get them on board with why we're doing it and put the business case out there to those that haven't necessarily seen it. And then the content playbook is something that actually we can use, we can give to our hiring manager community. They can make sure that they feel comfortable and they understand what Volt is, so that should they be interviewing a candidate who says, I was on Volt and I was reading this article about leadership styles, and I very much see that I am this kind of person. The person conducting the interview can actually know what they're talking about, rather than it just being something that we've done in isolation. I think that was really important for us, and Dave and his team were really instrumental in getting that off the ground and making sure that we did prep and brief the wider community outside of our resourcing team.
Dave, from your perspective, what is the focus on creating this? This is, I guess, it's a kind of framework for best practice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really fascinating as we were looking at, well, what does the good guys of recruitment mean, and how do we need to be, and how we are on the content we create at different stages of that journey. So the playbook came about, and it is absolutely a framework or a set of rules that when we're thinking about what we need to create, we apply these rules, and actually it steers us in the right direction. So, for people looking here, what you can see on the left-hand side, the panel left-hand side, what you can see is, well, okay, as Virgin Media and to be the good guys and become famous candidates, we want to help educate, inspire, we want to support and engage, and that's how we want to do this. How can we go about being, delivering our why, if you like? And we want to do that by being open-minded, fun and generous, which now starts to play into the values and the EVP of what Virgin Media is all about. And then it's the when. When are we going to deliver that piece of content? And it could be it could be visual assets, we've seen infographics, it can be just pure content, it can be videos. We've got Usain Bolt inside a Bolt, and there's a poem, I didn't even realise I'd done that. But it's how are we going to educate, being in what way that brings the EVP alive, and when is it? Is it at the start of the process? Is it the attraction phase? Is it when we're applying, or is it once they're inside a vault and they're at the assessment stage? How are we helping support them and engage them with a bit of fun and being generous in how we're giving content away to just help them on their journey? And absolutely became a framework. And what we're finding is it's great for generating ideas as well. It kind of gives us those rules. So it's been really, really cool, to be honest.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think it can be really tough to get everyone to think in the same way or on the same page, and the playbook is a great way of illustrating that to the business. I mean, given all this hard work, what are you seeing as the major outcomes, from the process so far, Neil? Is there anything to share?
Yeah, definitely. So I can't unfortunately report that we've saved the business £4.5 million just yet, but we're watching the bank balance at the moment. But if you look at candidate NPS, then we definitely see a marked improvement in the performance of our NPS, especially from those candidates that were rejected. So getting some great, so as well as people scoring us, they also get an opportunity to provide anecdotal feedback, and we do look through that to see where there are areas for improvement. And what is really useful for us is actually just understanding what things have helped people through that process. What did they like? And it's not all about Volt, let's be clear. A lot of the groundwork has been done in just educating our recruiters and our hiring managers on best practice, but also just making sure that those candidates that were nervous or didn't really understand the process because they'd never gone through anything like this before did feel a lot more comfortable, even if they didn't get the job. So I'm sort of pleased to report at the moment candidate NPS for rejected candidates has shot up from -29. We're now at +11, but we know that we're not going to rest on our laurels. There's a lot of work to do. The recruitment team have been working tirelessly to ensure that we do give as much feedback as possible to candidates. But there will undoubtedly be times where actually NPS satisfaction, we may have one assessment centre where actually something goes drastically wrong, and it has to be rescheduled for some unforeseen circumstance, and all of a sudden, the impact of that one assessment centre being cancelled and people being put out because they've got to take more time off work can have a drastic impact. But the fact that we're at +11 from -29 is great for us. And then when you also look at some of the engagement that we're seeing on our social media channels, whilst this isn't necessarily in volume, we're seeing some really nice stories from people that have used the content that we've provided them to help either inform them through the recruitment process or just give them a bit of reassurance that actually, it's okay, you're not asking a silly question, and actually it's great to hear when people have said, I read this article but I want to know more. We had one guy that was applying for a field technician role, who's got a beard, as you can see, Gary, and he was nervous because he was like, well, do you need me to shave that off for the interview? And actually, we could have a one-to-one conversation with them and say, well, no, that's part of you. Don't be afraid to, shave your beard off just because you're trying to impress us at the interview. And it's just getting people comfortable with, we don't want you to try and be somebody you're not. We will do everything we possibly can to ensure that we're recruiting on talent and potential, not on appearance. So just having the opportunity to be able to engage with people, reassure them, that's been a really positive outcome for us as well.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about this is that I haven't really heard you or the team talking so much around requisition. The focus for this whole project has been around relationships, which I think is something that we could all do better within our organisations from a recruiting perspective. But again, it's not just about the relationship with the external candidate community. I know that you guys have also put in a focus on the relationship between the candidate and hiring manager and given some support around that. Can you talk to kind of the additional sort of training that you gave to the hiring manager community to assist with that?
Yeah, so along with Volt and along with our new ATS Avature, we implemented across the business gold standard interview training. There are a lot of people in our business that are new to recruiting, new to being a hiring manager. We're in many respects a very large business with lots of growth areas, and that means we've got people that are new to management, people that aren't necessarily used to following process when it comes to recruiting. Our gold standards interview training was designed really to help those individuals to make sure they get the deal in terms of what's expected of them, not just what's expected of the candidate. Some of our negative feedback in the past was around candidates going to an interview in a Costa Coffee and having their hiring manager take phone calls during the interview or be in an open area where actually they're discussing fairly personal or confidential information, and actually just getting our hiring managers to understand the role that they need to play, getting our recruiters to understand the importance that they play in giving support and coaching and guidance to those candidates. So as candidates apply for some of our specialist roles, making sure that they give the candidate the opportunity to get access to their Savile Wave consulting report, which we would carry out as part of their recruitment process if they were coming to a face-to-face interview. And then it's going back to the candidate. So there's this kind of freeway, how would you call it? I mean, bizarre love triangle, if you like, referring to a sort of New Order song where, the hiring manager's needs versus the recruiter's needs versus the candidate's needs. Quite often we don't think about them in its entirety, and for us it was just really important to look at everybody's perspective, but realise ultimately that what we're doing is doing something for the candidate to get the best people into our business.
Yeah, I couldn't have thought of a better analogy, Neil. As you say, an awkward love triangle between those groups is a great way to summarise it, and the coaching that you're giving hopefully kind of closes those gaps. You're getting some fantastic internal traction. You're getting some initial feedback from the candidate community and the business itself. I've personally seen a lot of external recognition too. You're getting some interesting reporting and global recognition for the efforts so far.
Yeah, and I think obviously attending sessions such as this where clearly a lot of people are interested in what we've got to say. I think the key thing really is we haven't nailed it, and there will be other companies that will come along and do things differently and probably come along with more innovative ways of doing things, and we'll learn from them and we'll test and adapt. But it is great that we're getting lots of recognition for what we're doing. I think for us it's just a realisation that this is only the first step in that journey of improving the experience, and yes, great that we're getting lots of coverage and exposure, but we need to deliver on what we said we were going to deliver on. We'll be watching the stats very closely, looking at the cost savings to the business. But for us, I guess it's about taking things to the next stage, actually adapting this and exploring the potential that Volt can offer working with Avature in future. And there's lots of things that we want to work on, really.
Yeah, and I guess with that in mind, Neil, going forward, next steps, future state, you're going to look to focus on, continuing that candidate experience throughout the entire process. I'm assuming technology is going to play a key part in developing that strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I talked earlier maybe slightly negatively about automation and the impact that has on the candidate experience, but actually there's a lot of positives that can be gained from it. I think for us it's just ensuring that we are using the technology in the right way, that we're being open and upfront with our suppliers to ensure that we are getting the best possible advice and consultancy, but actually we're always thinking about the candidate experience, and we're thinking about how as a business we can attract the best people to come and work for us. And we're still learning. This was a brand new platform. It wasn't something that we just bought off the shelf, and there's lots more that we want to do with it, and we've only really just begun to start getting started really. I think if I show you sort of what we've got on Vault at the moment as well, a lot of what Vault does is great. It's a personalised experience. We're delivering rich content. We've got metrics and measurement in there to see how effective it's being, but there's a lot more we want to do. So putting greater personalisation into the process. So just little things like going back to Dave's point about the sort of Amazon instant buy buttons or whatever, doing that kind of thing where we're giving a more richer experience. So depending what time of day they log in, giving a personalised message on screen, putting their name into the login screen. If somebody's already applied for a job and then wants to apply for another job, why do we make them go through all the same hoops that they would have had to go through in a brand new application? Is there a way that we could fast track their application because we know that they already applied for a similar job, and actually we know how well they performed in the interview for the first stages? We're looking at rewards and offering incentives to candidates. We're also wary of overselling the Virgin Dream, as it were, and getting people feeling a little bit like they're being sort of forced to buy a Virgin product just because they've applied for a job. That's the last thing we want them to do. But if we could give them access to, I don't know, if we know that they're a Virgin Media customer and they've gone through the recruitment process, and they might have been a silver medalist because actually, whilst they performed really well, they just weren't quite right for that role. We want to keep them engaged. What could we do to incentivize them and keep them more engaged with our business? And that could be giving them, half-price line rental for a month, or giving them access to some exclusive content. And then in terms of the jobs, I think for us it's about being smarter, being able to serve up relevant adverts to them, using more dynamic technology to keep them engaged and keep them using Vault even after they've completed that application.
And again, there's a natural progression here, Neil. You've tackled the front end piece. You've tackled the initial building of the relationship. I know some people attending today have already been asking questions around what next from an onboarding perspective. It's a piece of the puzzle that many organisations are still struggling with. It's the perfect time for candidates to receive a counter offer, once they've already exited their current organisation. Where's the thinking for you guys around the onboarding of those candidates that have had the fantastic candidate experience? How are you going to maintain that all the way into becoming a new employee?
I think for us the key thing is just making sure that they don't feel like they've come out of one system and then being sort of forced into another one. So that experience needs to be a lot more consistent. So currently we have an onboarding platform. It's a standalone website, and it provides some really useful, insightful content that you wouldn't want to serve to somebody that was just inquiring about a job. You want to give it to them once they're in that process. But by looking at the capabilities of the onboarding portals within Avature, for example, looking at how that can talk with Vault to serve up better content. If we know what location somebody's applying for, well, let's give them content just specific to that person in that location. We can skip all of the wider fluffy content that actually they're going to get as part of their corporate induction, and let's just give them stuff that's relevant to them in their role. I think quite often where we see drop-off from candidates actually accepting a position and disengagement is where they don't really feel like, especially if they're on 3 months notice, for example, they don't really feel like they're getting much back from us apart from, can you complete this form, and can you give us your bank details so that we can make sure you get paid from day one. Let's give them a chance to meet their team, be it virtually or whatever whatever it might be. Let's give them a chance to get access to some of that great content that we have as a business, even though they haven't officially joined the business. Maybe we can give them restricted access to our intranet site via the ATS or via Vault, and some of the ideas that the guys at PH have been coming up with around how we could improve that. So let's think about what happens once they've got to that final stage and they've got the job. Actually, there's no reason why Vault couldn't be used to host some induction materials that they could complete before they've even joined the business. Some of the useful documents, and even though we're a tech business, unfortunately we do have quite a lot of process and forms that need filling in. But if we could give them that kind of information before they've joined, actually on day one they'll already be much further ahead than some of our new joiners that find, even in their first week, they don't have their laptop or they haven't got access to buildings on their pass because they're not officially within the business. So there's a way of using Vault to speed up that process.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, look, Dave, I think we've got another slide here which maybe you can give some parting comments before we move on to the questions. There's a ton of questions to get through, but what are we seeing as well, brought it up? What are the main takeaways that our attendees could consider from today's session?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I think the first thing that we did with the guys at Virgin Media was we actually stepped back and thought about it and walked through the shoes of the candidate, and we mapped out that journey. And actually when we were doing the sessions with the guys, it is amazing just to see the mindset shift of people and what the solutions and the thoughts, and sometimes it's really simple things, just by walking in their shoes. And actually when you're looking at the feedback, it's about listening. I think it's Stephen Covey who sort of says, the problem with listening is we listen to reply, not to understand. But when you have some of the data and the insights that the guys at Virgin have, you are then listening to understand from the candidate's viewpoint and thinking, how do we improve this across our journey? And being there to listen. Vault helps them listen more. We're looking at how we can improve that. And that actually makes people available. So what, like I touched on before, being available for candidates, using technology to be available to listen and then to be able to respond. Neil's touched on a few examples there. So being available, focusing on feelings and thoughts, think about emotions that people go on. It is an emotional, the world of recruitment is an emotional roller coaster for candidates. How people feel has a real impact on then the thoughts towards you as a brand. Being personal, and that can be using tech to personalise. But also, as we're seeing with what the guys have done in terms of the gold standard training, hiring managers, how can they be more personal and be more human? How can we just be human and understand people? And ultimately, I guess, just being honest and helpful. I think what the guys at Virgin have really grasped at Virgin Media is, Neil, all the team, everything they do it is very much about, let's just be honest, let's be upfront, let's help people feel great. And let's genuinely and authentically help them on their journey. Whether they work with us or not, let's do the best we can. And genuinely, they've all bought into the why, which is let's just be the good guys of recruitment.
Fantastic. Well, look, guys, we're coming up towards the end of the session, and there's loads of questions, certainly extremely complimentary about the work that's been carried out here. So maybe we move straight into the questions with just sort of 5 minutes left. And great question here. Looking at the measurements, the question is around NPS. Is one way of measuring return on investment, but what other measures are you going to put in place? Neil, this is probably a question for you. In order to calculate return on investment, from all the projects that you've put together here. Either now or at some point in the future.
Yeah, a great question. I mean, yes. So naively, I was focusing on NPS, but we're also, as well as looking at those sort of metrics, looking at our cost per hire, our time to hire, looking at just engagement generally. So actually, how engaged are people with us? So as they go through that recruitment process, where do they drop off and why they're dropping off? I think for us, it's understanding which areas of our business is engagement worse, and how can we address those through better content, through a better process? How can we, if attrition, or sorry, unfulfillment assessment centres is an issue, then actually it's costing the business a lot of money to run those assessment centres, so why are we continually forcing ourselves to run those if we're not getting enough people to sign up to them? Do we need a better approach to how we manage those? So we'll measure success by how many people we get into those sessions, and then really for me it will be about taking a step back and looking at as a business, what commercially have we achieved? So yes, we set out to save £4.5 million. How easy is it going to be for us to demonstrate that we saved that? We need to look at how much money it's cost us to create Volt. So we've had to shift budget away from traditional advertising to invest it into Volt, and that was a risk because actually, we can say, well, job boards will get you a certain amount of applications. Actually, Volt isn't going to get applications realistically because people have already applied. But if we can reduce attrition, so if we can look at how long people stay in the business after they join, attrition for us is a challenge, just like a lot of businesses that operate large call centres operating in volume recruitment. So actually, if we can demonstrate that we've reduced attrition by an X%, then that saving to the business can then be offset against the costs we've invested into this. So there's lots of different ways, and we're looking at them all at the moment is the honest answer.
Great. And I think there's a couple of questions here that are similar, so I'm going to try and merge these together because I think they feed back directly to what you were just saying. And this is more around the collection of the data, of the feedback from the candidates. So the first question is, are you just triggering that feedback request at certain stages of the process? So once they get beyond an interview stage, for instance, and also is included in that specific feedback, are you tracking things like reason of rejection so you can start analysing that against the experience that candidate received? Yeah,
so absolutely we are. I think when we did the sort of survey in end of 2014, 2 years ago, we were only surveying people that had joined the business, and sorry, we're giving them the right to reply, or people that have been rejected. What we weren't actually doing is those people that have withdrawn themselves from the process, we weren't giving them an opportunity to give their feedback. So we were getting feedback from people that had applied and we'd rejected, or applied and we'd offered, but we weren't asking people through the process that pulled out for whatever reason, or actually just people that might have showed an interest but then didn't go on and complete. So with this tool now to measure the moment in the moment, we're actually able to get a lot more useful insight across the entire recruitment process. What we need to do is look at, on our career site, how we could actually start to measure how they're feeling there before they've even submitted an application. And we're not doing that at the moment, but I think that would be certainly a next step to understand, is there something that's putting people off even starting an application? Where we do the pop-ups and ask people how they're feeling, at the moment it's kind of been set based on the different stages of the recruitment process. What we didn't want to do is have people's experience ruined by having a constant pop-up on their screen and feeling that actually that's having a negative impact on their experience. So for us, we've probably been, and we don't force people. You don't have to click to say how you're feeling. You can just dismiss the pop-up on the screen. So for us, we're not forcing people to do it, and equally we're not forcing people to use Volt. So we did that deliberately because actually you might apply for a job and feel you don't need to be told how to prepare for an interview because you know how to prepare, and actually you don't need to check the status of your application every day because you've got a good relationship with your recruiter. So it is an optional tool at the moment, and I don't think we'll ever mandate it that you have to use it, but maybe in future we'll look at how we can improve the amount of richness of data we get.
Great. Two more quick questions. Let's see if we can answer these in the last minute. The first is around any change required for recruiters' behaviour. We spoke a lot about the hiring manager changing their behaviour and changing the experience for the candidates. Anything that you did for the recruiters to help them improve candidate experience?
Getting them involved. Honestly, just making them feel part of this process, getting feedback from them. So, when they speak to candidates, what candidates telling them, realising that, we don't want to be adding to their workload. They're already, working flat out, managing all of those applications that come in, but just getting them to feel like actually this is going to add value to them. So, from the initial sort of candidate experience journey mapping that Dave and the team did, all the way through to the content that we push out on social at the moment, and the themes that we discuss in terms of, you know, what article should we write, what video should we film next, you know, actually getting them involved in that process, because, you know, those guys, yeah, they're the ones that are interacting with the candidates firsthand, and they know what the candidates want.
Great stuff. Well, look, Dave, Neil, we've come to the end of today's presentation. To all the attendees, thanks so much for joining and taking some time out this afternoon. Our contact details are here on this final slide, so feel free to communicate and contact with us directly if needed. It just remains for me to, again, thank you very much for your time and attention. We look forward to hosting you and seeing you on another webinar in the not too distant future. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Neil, Dave, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.